What's going on, Pro Lacrosse fans? Welcome to the first episode of the Fantasy Lacrosse Podcast, the revival, I guess, bringing it back. Part of the Pro Lacrosse Talk Podcast Network. I'm your host, Parker Blake, at Parker Blake 60 on Twitter. And with me are Matt Brignati at Matt Brignati and Topher Adams at Topher_Adams on Twitter. Give them a follow so you can get their awesome takes on this new Player Royale. And I just kind of wanted to start off by talking about kind of how are you liking it so far? We've hit 1 week. Start with you, Topher. What do you think about it? How'd you do? Just kind of the overall gist.
Yeah, I mean, I actually loved it. I thought it was great to have like this official, fairly efficient fantasy game to play. You know, there've been other kind of third-party attempts, and those were noble attempts, but to have this more efficient, more legitimate system, it was just so much more fun. You know, it reminded me a lot of the Major League Soccer, their online fantasy game. You know, it's kind of run by the league, and you know, it's a very efficient way to kind of engage with the league a little better. Now, I didn't personally do that great. I kind of took some swings that kind of backfired, mostly Joe Nardella, but otherwise,
I saw a lot of people had Nardella in their lineups last week.
I thought he had the good matchup with Chaos, but Tommy Kelly kept them at like 50%. So it basically a nothing from them.
What about you, Matt?
I really like this fantasy game. You know, it reminded me a lot of like the DraftKings daily fantasy. You know, all those gambling sites, they do something similar to this, pretty much, you know, daily, week to week kind of format. And I thought it was really interesting. I think it'll make for a really fun summer and a cool concept that might bring in a different demographic of fans, and also just another way to keep the fans of the league engaged and just following players from week to week. So now people will have a better understanding about how everyone is doing throughout the year, because they'll see how players are playing from fantasy. So I thought it was a really, really cool concept, and I'm excited to see where it goes for the rest of the year.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great way to kind of roll out the concept of fantasy sports. I will have to say, like, the one-on-one challenging thing hasn't been my favorite. I'd like if you could do like a group or something. But besides that, I mean, I won all my games last week except for the one where me and my buddy set the exact same lineup somehow. And we tied, luckily. So, but yeah, no, it was a good first week, and I can't wait to see what happens moving forward. Let's just roll into it. I just want to roll through kind of the top performers at each position, and then I'll let you guys go on to talk about whatever you saw last week and any surprises you found or what have you. So just going, attack was Jeff Teat, obviously 31 points, had a huge week, and I think everyone knew he was going to be the top performer of the entire league this week. Henningberg from the Woods had 24 points, playing X because Rob Pennell got hurt, and being a Woods fan, that was a frustrating game to watch, but we don't have to talk about that. And then Eli Salama slotted as a D player this week, at least, scored 21 points. Like I talked about earlier this week, filling up almost every single stat category possible for positive points. That 2 ball is really big, bringing in 10 of his points, but still a great week. And then moving on to goalie, Morocco had an amazing game, almost became the player of the week, only got 30 points. But I mean, I really thought Blaze was going to bring my lineup to victory with his 18 points. Thought that was crazy. Didn't think anybody could top that. And then Morocco came out and just went off. Can't shoot on Morocco, apparently. And then we'll wrap up the kind of rundown there with Baptiste, who with his 2 ball and just amazing at the stripe, pulled out 26.6 points to wrap up kind of the top performers. And then I'll just throw it to you, Matt. What did you see last week?
Well, I thought that you kind of saw that the offensive players, they were the highest scoring players overall, you know, so it's not really like, well, except for Nick Morocco and Blaze for the 2 goalies who had really high scoring days, but just overall offensive players, they score the most points. Defensive players, just how it's based off the scoring, they just don't score as much, and they're a little 2 ball reliant. So I thought that like based off the scoring that they did, it'd be a little more even. You'd see a little bit more diversity in the top 10, but it was, mostly attack in that top 10 of scoring. So yeah, I thought that it'd be a little more diverse, and it wasn't.
Yeah, and I mean, if you just look at the top five, it's an interesting mix, but it makes sense because you have three attacks with Teat, Law, and Lyle. Obviously, I mean, I think Lyle and Teat are going to be at there all season, but and then the only other two that broke in there were Morocco with his 30-point outing, which I feel like that's going to be an anomaly. I don't think we're going to get consistent a 30-point goalie every week. I mean, I'll happily eat my words if we do because that'll be awesome to watch, but especially loving betting the under. But and then Trevor Baptiste rounded it out from the stripe at 26.6. But I mean, really, there was no defense represented besides Salama until we got to Daniel Logan, who tied for 13th. So what'd you see, Topher?
Yeah, a lot of the same is very offensively focused, which makes sense. It's a fantasy game, which is going to reward stats, and most stats are on the offensive side of the ball. You mentioned Baptiste kind of in the top five. I was surprised that any face-off guy could really put up that many points because, you lose more points for losing a face-off than you get for winning a face-off. So, to actually have a productive fantasy day, you have to really dominate your matchup. You have to win at least 60+% of the draws and add a little offense. And him to be able to do that against, easily the second best guy in the league, that was a very impressive individual matchup. And then, the other guy who dominated, Nick Morocco, I think that's just a testament to the high volume goalies, the goalies who see a lot of shots, they'll just rack up a ton of points. I'm sure Blaze will probably come close to 30 points at least a couple times throughout the course of the season because Blaze Reardon and Nick Morocco are like two guys who I feel comfortable will make, like 15 plus saves basically every single game the rest of the season. Now, how many shots they let in, Nick Morocco will probably let in a few more than Blaze, but I don't know. Great start for him this season.
Well, that's the big thing too. And I guess we kind of should have gone over the scoring stuff. But I think you made a great point where when you get these high volume goalies, I mean, it's great when they're getting all the saves, but you do have to remember, I mean, you're getting points knocked against you for goals allowed. So, I mean, you might have a high volume goalie that can make a lot of saves potentially, but I mean, if he's allowing half the shots in, it's not really working out for him. But I mean, I guess we should run through just kind of a quick scoring rundown. I mean, I'll just be as fast as I can. But we'll just start at the beginning of the stat sheet. But so goals are worth 5 points, 2-point goals are worth 10 points, assists are worth 5 points. Turnovers are -2 points, caused turnovers are 5 points, ground balls are 1. Winning a faceoff gets you 0.8 points. And then, like my man just said, you're going to lose a full point for losing that faceoff. So it's going to be hard to go positive just getting faceoff stats. Saves are 2 points, and then 1-point goals against a goalie are -1. 2-point goals are -2. But then let's just keep moving right along. So who are you guys looking to watch? I'll start with you, Topher, in this kind of week 2 after we, got the premiere last week of Player Royale. Who's going to pop off this week?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be a lot of the same faces, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I look at that Cannons Atlas game on Saturday night, and I feel like that is going to be a good fantasy game because both those teams play fast. They move the ball a lot, they score a lot of goals. So I feel like there'll be a lot of opportunity for guys to pile up points. So one of Jeff Teat and Lyle Thompson, those are probably good high volume guys to look at. Some of the transition guys, Danny Logan had a big game last week. He could potentially get involved transition again. Trevor Baptiste has an even better matchup this week at the stripe. So I think that basically any offensively minded player or potentially a transition guy in those games or in that game in particular are one to watch, and potentially the goalies. But as you mentioned, Nick Morocco is going to make a lot of saves, but will he, have a high enough save percentage for it to be a profitable value? And that I'm not sure.
Still has to keep him out for sure.
Exactly.
Who do you got this week, Matt?
One guy that really stood out to me, he was a tier 3 guy, Graham Hossack of the Archers. He didn't have the best first week, so they put him in as a tier 3 this week. And, he's going against a chaos offense that's missing almost all their pieces. not looking super strong on offense. And I think the reigning defensive player of the year is going to take advantage of that. He's not like the biggest transition threat, which is like the only reason I'm a little hesitant. But I think that he's a little bit safer than putting in a guy and just like praying that he gets a 2. Because I think Graham is going to be good for a good amount of caused turnovers and ground balls this week. So that's why I'm going to put him in there at tier 3. And that's a guy that really stood out to me when I was setting my lineup.
Oh, for sure. I know we were talking about it just kind of before we got on here and earlier throughout the week, but it's hard to pick kind of these players. And look, when you look at the scoring, where do you want to get the guy that has more shots at that 10.2 ball, or do you want to look at a guy that's causing turnovers or getting ground balls and kind of getting those lower value scoring stats, I suppose. But I mean, it's kind of, that's where we have to make your decisions moving forward. And was the hardest part for me. And I think just the 2 players that I want to go over, and just based on the way they're doing their tiers, it's based on average points, and we only have 1 week. So TD, who had a really soft week last week, I mean, he came out in the 3rd tier, and I think TD Erlin against anybody but Baptiste is going to have an awesome week. And I mean, he set records last year, so why not go for it again this year? And I think as a tier 3 player, he's got to be an automatic guy in your lineup. And I said the same thing with Blaze in tier 2. I mean, I don't think he had a bad week last week at all. I'm going to ride with him probably all season because I bet on Blaze all season. So, but that's just kind of a little preview what I got going. Let's move right into it and go over who we have in our lineups and hope we don't make fools of ourselves this week. So start with you, Matt. Who you got riding?
Well, I'm going to start off with my tier 3. I actually want to correct myself. Graham Hosek is a tier 2, but at my tier 3, I also have T. Erlin. It's like, I still can't believe he's a tier 3, and he's a top 2 faceoff guy in this league, and he's gonna put up numbers against everyone else except Baptiste. So I got TD Erlin as my tier 3 faceoff guy, and for my tier 2 guys, I have Blaze Reardon at goalie. We've talked about him, and Graham Hossack, who I already mentioned, and then tier 1. The only 2 spots I have left are at attack and midfield. So my midfielder, tier 1, I have Zach Courier. He had 17 points last week. He's a guy who can do it all, and he does do it all. So he's a guy that I feel comfortable in my lineup putting him in there, because if he is not really scoring if he's not really scoring and he's not really like having the best game scoring wise, he could make up for it in other ways. So I think that he's a safer bet. And then at my attack spot, tier 1, I have Jeff Teat. He's going to get his scoring chances. Obviously, he's a favorite for MVP for a reason. And he's a guy that I feel really comfortable putting in my lineup with. And I feel really great about him. So, yeah, those are my lineups. I got Jeff Teat, Zach Courier, Graham Hossack, TD Erlin, and Blaze Reardon.
Nice. Go ahead, Topher.
Right. So I actually had a pretty similar lineup to you, Matt. I went with Blaze and TD, kind of those value picks. I did think about Blaze a little bit, because my only hesitation is that is probably going to be a fairly slow-paced, low-scoring game. Both of those are better defensive teams than they are offensive, especially right now at this point in the season. So I do wonder if he's going to have that big of a day. But that being said, he's probably safe for at least 15 points. So I'm comfortable rocking with Blaze no matter what. Moving to defense, another tier 2 guy who's I think a little undervalued right now, Michael Earhart from the Whip Snakes, playing back in Charlotte from his MLL days. He's a two bomb threat in transition. He can scoop up every ground ball, wreak havoc, causing turnovers. Didn't have the biggest statistical game last week. I still think he was pretty great in that game. He could really own the middle of the field this weekend. Then moving on to the 2 tier 1 players, I also picked Jeff Teat. I know he's probably good for another 3-3 type of game. He's a beast. Going to be plenty of scoring opportunities against the kind of weak Cannons defense. Then midfield, I thought about Courier, who I rolled with last week, but I decided to mix it up. Try a little something different. One with Jules Henningberg from the Redwoods. He just looked just at a different level physically than the guys he was dodging against last week. against Atlas. You know, I don't know how well the Redwoods as a team will play, but I feel comfortable that Jules is going to beat his man at least 3 times for a couple of goals, maybe get an assist or 2. He was a beast off the ground last week as well. I think he had 5 ground balls or something crazy. So I think Jules is going to have another really strong game, and that kind of rounds out my lineup.
No, I mean, I really did think I was going to be in the minutia of selecting Jules as my midi, but I guess I'll start too. I mean, obviously, I think we all got TD in our 3rd tier spot because that's just ridiculous value. And I think if you don't, then I hope you got something else good cooking. And then I also had Blaze playing goal as one of my tier 2 guys. But I do want to say I did look around. There were 3 tier 2 goalies, and Scanone from the Chrome, I think, has great potential to hit a lot of points this week. I think it's going to be a really fast-paced game, personally. And I think there's going to be a lot of shots on goal, especially on that Chrome side. But moving forward, my other tier 2, I went with Newman. And honestly, I wish I had more to back that up. I think he's a great threat from deep, but I also was kind of stuck because I couldn't figure out who to play for D. Didn't know if I wanted to go for cost turnovers. Didn't know if I wanted to go for the 2 ball. So I went directly to my tier 1, and then Newman was the top tier 2 player. So that is why I selected him. But then my 2 tier 1 guys are Jeff Teat and then Jules Henningberg. I mean, last season, Teat was averaging 21 fantasy points a game if we use the same model as we are this season. And I think if you can average 21 last season, come out and open the season at 31, you got my vote. And then I agree with everything you said, Topher, about Henningberg. I think he's going to be a big player for the Woods this season. And I think with Pennell being questionable last week and maybe not being 100% coming into this week, he's got a lot of potential. For what it's worth, I have the over on his player prop too. So let's get some points from Henningberg. But unless you guys have anything else to talk about or that you want to bring up, I think that's all from us. Be sure to follow us over at Fantasy Lacrosse on Twitter, and then make sure you follow all 3 of us, get our takes throughout the week, and shoot us your links so we can challenge you, so you can see how you do against our lineups.